Hey everybody, it's Friday, June the 14th, 2024, and this is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast where I, Pastor Trey Comstock, and my friend and colleague, Pastor Emily Larson, talk about how to make church happen and how to make church happen again. We should probably just declare this Fresh Expression Summer because we are going to talk more about this kind of Fresh Expressions movement that has been going on in the British Methodist Church for a really long time and is really becoming what a lot of folks are seeing as a way forward for the United Methodist Church. This week, I attended, until I got a stomach bug, and I'm going back to in an hour, the Texas Annual Conference, the United Methodist Church, kind of my home conference. And we had the blessing of having the Reverend Michael Beck with us, who is the Fresh Expressions person, right? He is works on the denominational level in Fresh Expressions. He's been a real, they use this word pioneer, and he's like, yeah, that made a lot of sense in the British context. In the American context, you say pioneer and it's got all these things, but that is what they call it. So he's been a real driving force. He has built this amazing system of Fresh Expressions in his own context. He's a guy who describes, and this is something I can really identify with, of I really want the churches that are that are dead, and then we birth this new thing out of that. He deliberately goes and they use the word inherited church for the existing church structures, and so he had and also he lives out another thing we've talked about before of his appointment is part-time, so that he's not burdening the church. And then he works, he can work as an author and a speaker and work on the denominational level to promote Fresh Expressions. And so he balances out to living a life, but in his local context, he is part-time. And part of how he's able to be part-time, and they have these a community that meets as part of a tattoo parlor, and he has so he gets discounts on tattoos, and he's joking he's running out of space on his arms, and he's his arms are covered with all these icons of saints. It's beautiful because they have tattoo parlor church, and they have dog park church, and they have they all have cool pithy names, one where you eat burritos at a burrito shop. And it's a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about, both without the language of Fresh Expression and now applied to the language of Fresh Expression. So he has all of this. It's amazing. And I got to sit in on a couple of sessions with him until my stomach exploded. But one of the things, there's a couple of things that he's talked about that are not things that we have hit on before. We've hit on before a lot of hey, you've got to be interesting. Whatever you do in your personal life, can that be a place for community, right? I think we're going to have our Dungeons and Dragons friends on the show soon, and talk about D&D church. Of hey, that's awesome. Are you a farmer? Do you have a farm? Right. We've talked about that side of it. One of the things that Michael talks about, and that Fresh Expressions really promotes, is that the pastor is not the one driving it. The pastor is the permission giver, and then lay folks are the ones doing a lot of the work. And I don't just mean the grunt work. I mean the leading the theological conversation, building the relationships work. And so part of why he's able to be part-time in his appointment is that he doesn't have to manage whatever it is. They have a dozen Fresh Expressions. He doesn't have to manage a dozen Fresh Expressions. He doesn't have a calendar that is looks like mine, which is prep this, do this, prep this, do this. It is, this person's going to do it. I'm going to show up and participate if I can. Oh, this person's going to do it. I'm going to show up and I'm going to participate if I can. And that even goes into how they handle the preaching role. Right? He jokes hey, I got to preach sometimes. But a lot of the time, he and his wife are co-pastors. They're both not the ones driving the spoken theological side or the relationship building or the whatever that it is. They are empowering, they are permission giving to laity, they are also training and giving like intentional, like train the trainers, right? Like that they teach
Yes.
the lay leadership, and then the lay leadership goes and does a thing, which is very countercultural to the like past 50 years of church development or more, where it is churches managed and run, and Emily, you and I are both a product of this, or a beneficiary of this, of like the church is managed and run by an increasingly professional class. And what you're doing is you're raising money to pay the professional class to run your congregation. There's a church I interviewed for once that like had almost as many staff as members of the congregation. And they had like there was a very wealthy church. They had like a $5 million budget. So they could afford a staff of dozens to do all of the things. We don't need to coordinate the food bank. We're going to hire a food bank coordinator. We don't need to teach Sunday school. We'll hire not just a children's director, but we'll hire Sunday school teachers, right? And so this runs really counter to that, where Michael goes, yeah, no, this is meant to be like, we're all involved in this. And that is, I mean, I love it. I love it. But it's terrifying. Like, it's also, it's scary.
Yeah, it is. But the church is finally getting wise to this. I think we as a culture are finally getting wise to this as well. I was in a group of preschool mom-aged folks yesterday, and we were talking specifically about how we have outsourced things to professionals in life, in general, right? If you want your kid to play baseball, you don't go in the backyard and play catch with them anymore. You send them to, their team sports. If you want, and they're doing studies now, specifically my preschool moms were talking about this. We outsource the ability to read. Teaching your kid to read is now the job of the school. But looking at the success of kids who know how to read, it's not that a professional teacher has taught them. It's that they have had stories read to them by their parents, right? That kids learn to read in the lap of their parents or whoever is raising them.
Right.
And just doing that every single day. If you ask the best professional baseball players, pick your sport, who it was or where it was that they practiced the most, it was probably not at team sports. It probably started in the backyard playing catch, right? They are now tracking this back and can say, no, the people who actually, or professional chefs, who taught you how to cook? Well, actually, I learned cooking at the side of my grandmother in the kitchen. And that's how I actually learned to make good food. So empowering lay people in the church to disciple others, to lead, to preach is so, so, so important. At annual conference, actually, this week, we have a subset of people who are trained in the church called certified lay ministers. So it's people who are called specifically to lay ministry. And you and I have worked with Sister Brandy Dudley, who is phenomenal as a certified lay minister. And she's been on the show, friend of the show. And she used to tell me in the office, she said, I would go to these CLM, certified lay ministry meetings, and the other people would tell me, there wouldn't be very many participants. And she'd say, because they never got utilized. They never got the opportunity to preach. Right. They never, had a chance to be up in a pulpit. And she's sitting here, leading and preaching in 3 congregations a month. So there was a different dynamic there because we
on a podcast
very much utilized our CLM.
Jeez, yeah.
Yes, well, very, very important. But the difference at the annual conference this week, Mm-hmm.
But I think I am guilty of just being tactical and not being, strategic. Of like we did not set out for, the times we've got this right. And I think, the second half of our work at Grace Church, like we did a lot of this. I don't think I set out and said, okay, what I believe in is lay leadership. It's not that I don't believe in it, I do. But I did not, nowhere on the whiteboard did I say, like, hey, we want a lot we want a lot more lay leadership and lay teaching and whatever. It was, we got stretched so thin with all of the discipleship stuff that was going around, that and as they kept piling on more churches for us to deal with, that it was, well, I don't have a choice, right? We ended up with literal physics problems of, well, we want to invest in young adults, but we have the adult, like, main important Bible study that needs to happen on Wednesday night. Well, I'm going to hand that over to Calvin and Kathy, and because they're very capable teachers, decades of experience. Is it always going to be theologically 100% what I want? No, but within a bounds. And they're going to go that, and they're going to run with that. And so I'm going to play Dungeons and Dragons or Blades in the Dark with the young adults and use that as a tool to talk about Jesus. But it was like, I didn't say bullet point 1, more lay leadership. It was just shoot, or, with Brandy, it was, she was an avid listener to the podcast and then joined the podcast, and she got certified as a CLM just as we had too many preaching spots to fill. And we looked at each other and went, the only way we can do this is Brandy. The only way we can do this is Brandy. And we were able in that system to reach a lot and have a lot of really diverse context, from like Bible study at a pub to small country church and everything in between within that system. And it was lay leadership that made it physically possible, right? Like, I couldn't be at Theology on Tap every week. I could be there. I can only ever be anywhere about 75% of the time, because I've got to travel. I've got conferences. I get explosively ill. So the other 25% of the time was handing it to Brandy. And Brandy, perfectly at least as capable as I am to do that. But it was, we ended up reliant. And so I think what Michael's getting at is, rather than that be not a thing you do, or rather than that be a thing you stumble into, which I think is what I am the most guilty of I just stumble into it because I'm too much okay, I need to make this machine go. How do I make the machine go? Oh, Laity, cool. What I should say is, and what Michael is challenging us to say is, the laity, or the purpose from the beginning, build the machine that way intentionally, rather than the unintended consequences of stretching yourself wildly too thin, and a lot of things bearing fruit, and a physics problem.
Yes. And I can be just as guilty of going, because we tend to fall into the mindset of nobody can do it but me, or nobody can do it as good as me, as well as I can. But empowering your laity, not just permitting, but empowering and equipping the laity to step up into these leadership roles, creating an environment where laity can truly thrive in their gifts and spiritual talents that they are given, giving them the resources to grow into the people that they need to. At this year's annual conference, Brandy posted a huge picture of all the new CLMs and all of them getting together for their very own gathering. That's awesome. And how they got to do this very empowering thing at annual conference and have good representation there. And that matters. And so there was just this shift now to, yes, we're going to have CLMs. Yes, we're going to utilize our CLMs, but also our CLMs are so important. They get to have their own gathering, their own meal, their own meeting, and be equipped with the resources that should be available to the entire church, to all of the laity, that they can then take back to their laity as well. Because you don't have to be a certified laity. You just have to be a lay member. You just have to show up, right? If you show up to a church on Sunday morning,
we literally,
congratulations, you are a lay member.
We literally have within our governing document, the Book of Discipline, we literally have a thing that says the priesthood of all believers. And I think the other thing that Michael raises, and that has come up over and over again on the show, one of the underlying themes of the show is, hey, we have all of these great ideas that have existed in some cases for hundreds and in some cases for thousands of years. Why don't we do them? Right? This is what John Wesley did, right? That John Wesley did, where John Wesley was a brilliant theologian, but the other place he was brilliant was as an organizer of, I don't have that many priests, pastors in the early Methodist movement. We're going to empower the laity. I can't run all these small groups. If everyone's supposed to be in a small group, I can't run all these small groups. I don't have enough preachers. I don't have enough professionals to do that. So instead, like, we had lay leadership, that most of the spiritual work was happening in these, what we would now call fresh expressions. And the real spiritual grounding was an empowered and equipped layperson. It's why to this day, the United Methodist Church, you have to have a lay leader. We have all of these things that nod to, it's, pastors itinerate. It's not my church. I am not a member of the church. It's the laity. Like, we have all this rhetoric left over from the 17 and 1800s, but at some point we fell into that trap of, let's professionalize this. Let's make serving Jesus feel utterly inaccessible or not my department. My job is I fund the people so that I can come and consume church. And that is, I'm sorry, that is not biblical Christianity. And that is not Wesleyan Christianity, right? This is one of those places where, like, hey, one of the things I love about what Wesley comes up with is it looks a lot like everybody meaning the Great Commission. And we have tricked ourselves. And by the way, okay, so let's also talk about how that drastically inflates church budgets, right? When you have your professional class of Jesus people, then you need to pay them like a professional class of Jesus. I say as a professionally paid Jesus person, but like one of the big differences between old school church budgets and modern church budgets is we're trying to pay this entire professional class often to outsource the service of God to the people we pay rather than the people we empower and do.
Yes.
And
I've
so
been in
Michael
that
was able to run
where they just decided to pay someone.
Well, but we are as guilty of it as well, right? Like, everywhere I've been, I've increased church spending on people. Now, it is often particularly empowered lay people within. I very seldom make an outside hire for a reason, right? Like, if you look at where the new staff members we've added at Servants are all from the Spanish service to then serve their own community. Shoot, you were a particularly empowered lay person at Grace Church, right? And most of the hires we made at Grace were particularly empowered lay people. And so I think there is a middle ground. Brandy was a particularly empowered lay person. She's now full-time staff there. So again, this is not, but it is that when we look at, and we've talked about pastor burnout, and we've talked about why people leave the ministry, and I talk about my own frustrations of it. This is a really small one, but it drives me crazy that I have to pray over meals. It's not that I don't mind praying. It's public speak for a living, but it is like, you don't need me to do that. You don't need me to do that. You can do that. We have no theology that says I'm the only God talker here. You can talk to God. You can talk to God publicly. This is about stage fright. This is not about and if it is like, but I don't want to disrespect the pastor, a pastor needs to put themselves in a place where that's not going to disrespect them. Right? That it is like a let go. So there's like a let go of control. And in one of the sessions I was in, someone asked a really good question of like, hey, what if their theology's bad? And there's not a clean answer for that. Right? Michael, had like an answer that is basically like, some of it is about training. Some of it is about equipping. But I think in my own work, what I've seen is some of it is, maybe theological purity ain't always the goal. I think of it, this is a thing that comes from the Emmaus movement, which is great. But there's a river, right? And the river has some width to it, but there are banks. And to me, the goal is let's just stay in the river. And the river is reasonably wide because we're Methodist, but like there's a river. But that's about taking the time to train, taking the time to equip. And also, there is a leap of faith aspect of just like, you're going to have to trust. At some point, you're going to have to trust. And that is hard. That is shockingly difficult.
It is hard to release.
Like, right. But because, a lot of us come out of the like increasingly professionalization of church. And so it turns out that like I'm a really professional talker, right? I talk for a living. And I always suspect, and it's often true, I could have said that better. I could always just, and it takes on small things of like, I never have anyone else read scripture. I always read scripture, not because I think it's the role of pastor, but because I can do it better. Right. And that's not healthy. That's not good. I should, let that go. One of the ways I deal with that is I very seldom watch worship services of my church that I'm not in. Because so then I never have like, it is just like, yeah, y'all tell me how it goes. Y'all will tell me how it goes. And that feels better. So that's one of the ways like I deal with the like, because again, like I went to theater school, right? Yeah, probably, whatever. Right. But like it is about like letting that go.
Yeah. Well, and that's another part of it is we went to school for this, right? Like we had to go to seminary for this. So that wide river you're talking about, we know where that river's going, right? We had to study that river in depth for a very long time with very expensive degrees. And like, are not held to that same requirement, nor should we, because that's our job, is to empower and equip them to do that without having to go and take the time and expense of seminary. And then just letting go and seeing where that goes, right? Letting go, releasing perfection, and letting God do the work.
Because it is very clear, at least is becoming very clear to me, that this increasingly professionalized model just isn't working. Because it's so expensive. Right? As we talk about the like financial struggles of even big successful churches, the behemoth budgets, and most of what church are paying for are people or buildings. Right? And we're a church that happens to be like 50-50 of what we're paying. But a lot of churches, it's like 70-25. Like you're paying, what church budgets largely are not things. They are human time. And that is rough when what we're living is a faith that said everyone goes and makes disciples. And what we've created in a model is saying, well, they're the professional disciple makers and the rest of us are the funding base. And that ain't it, friends. That certainly isn't what you see in the early church. It is certainly not what you see in the early Methodist movement. It is and so it is convenient, but then it's also disempowering. So, I need to be a professional Jesus person if I really want to do this. No. We're all professional Jesus people. And then it becomes easy, like, I can just come and consume church because the professional Jesus people will do this. I don't need to go and do the risky thing of building relationships in a community, of starting my own church, my own little worshiping community at a tattoo parlor that I hang out at. Actually, it's everybody, right? I go on and on about this. This is a shorter show because of some just fascinatingly weird scheduling problems. If you have stories of as a layperson of your own empowerment, as a clergy person of trying to disempower yourself to empower others, we would love to hear about it. thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. It is thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. We are a lot of places doing a lot of things digitally. It's at Servants Now, back to just about everywhere. On the TikToks, on the Instagrams, on the Facebooks, on the YouTubes, and then servantsnow.org on the internet itself. If you want to support us, Lord knows we could use it. The show is made possible by a generous innovators grant by the Texas Annual Conference of United Methodist Church. But if you want to help us, like, comment, subscribe, share, leave us 5-star reviews in Apple Podcasts. All of that helps this show go further and be more sustainable. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.